Planning has become a real issue for every developer. We've waited 13 months before for a pre-app response on a single dwelling. A lot of people will factor in inflation to their appraisals.
How difficult it is to get past that first step of planning.
It's why I've got more grey hairs and receding hairline over the last couple of years, because it's become way more difficult. The red tape is massive. We submitted a 2-house scheme a couple of weeks ago, and I submitted 24 documents for that 2-unit scheme. And there are things within that process that aren't really the planner's responsibility. Things like energy performance, that's really something to do with building control. You know, once planning approval has been approved, it should then go on to building control. That's what the building regulations are there to set out and do. Yet we're doing reports that are, you know, upfront costs to us that are guaranteed to change. I've submitted so many energy statements that have just changed straight away as soon as the detailed design starts happening, but we've ticked the box from a planning perspective. And that kind of feels like what it is nowadays. Even the validating of the planning application is a tick box exercise, and it's someone at the other end of the screen that ticks off these things. If it doesn't have the right north arrow or it's the wrong scale, they say, no, I'm not validating this planning application. It just sits there until you've made the changes. So planning has become a real issue for every developer. There's no certainty. The timeframes just elongate and elongate and elongate.
What's the sort of timescale between that and getting your final sign-off?
I mean, it can vary. We've waited 13 months before for a pre-app response on a single dwelling. We've also had things go through in the 8 weeks that they should. It depends on the scale of the project, depends on the individual council. Some councils are more overrun than others in terms of resource. Some take a more pragmatic view than others. So it does vary, but you know, it's meant to be 8 weeks for minor applications, 13 weeks for major applications. I would be surprised if the average isn't something like 20 weeks, you know, across the board. And that, I think, I'd be relatively happy with 20 weeks on some of our schemes. Some last a lot longer than that.
So from a development point of view, I mean, it's quite dangerous, isn't it? Because you know, a planning application in itself is not cheap.
No.
There are a lot of fees, but there are a lot of sort of peripheral fees as well that you need to...
There are even more fees nowadays with the accompanying reports that you have to do and assessments that have to be submitted.
Okay. And also, from a very practical point of view, a developer does his costing to see that the whole scheme works and is profitable. And if it takes a long time to get through planning, even the material changes in terms of costs can be quite astronomical, can't they?
Huge. And
so you've almost got to go back again and say, listen, I can't do this.
Not a lot of people will factor in inflation to their appraisals. You know, they're sat here appraising the site from day one, but might not get to site for 2 years' time. And actually they've based their appraisal on yesterday's figures, so they do come unstuck quite a lot.
And of course, the authorities are just not sympathetic to this consideration.
They don't care. No. We had one in South London. We'd already waited 12 months, and it was purely to change a couple of windows and replace a conservatory with a tiled roof. And it took 12 months. And then the planning officer that we've been dealing with that was almost ready to kind of agree, left. Someone else came in, and then we waited another 3 months for it to be signed off by the new planning officer. And this is the sort of thing that happens all the time.
Yes. I mean, I should point out to our viewers who are not property professionals that you might think an architect's job is drawing the building, handing it over and going away. It's far from that.
It is.
In fact, once the planning permission has been agreed, I think your real work starts.
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of professionals, so planning consultants we would always bring on board because they understand the legal and the policy side of planning. An architect is going to be there for you from a design perspective, from a health and safety perspective, and they work together hand in hand to get the planning approval. But as soon as the planning approval is in play, then it's over to us to do the detailed design and really bring it to life.
And specifications and building regulation requirements change during that period, don't they?
Hugely, yeah. Sometimes we're rushing to get a building control notice in because we know the regulations are changing next month, so we want it registered under the old regulations because the new regulations are probably going to cost us 10% more in our build costs.
Yes.
Because there's more insulation in the walls, more regulation around air source heat pumps and changing our heating strategy and things like that. So yeah, every change that comes, we're really keen to understand the implications.